everybody. I'm Audrey. I'm a content analyst with CCW Digital, and I'm really excited to bring you all this webinar today. I'm joined by a few of our excellent guests, and we're going to be talking all about how your interactions are telling you something, and whether or not you're listening is kind of the big question in this conversation. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Bill Quinn, the Director of Project Planning and Implementation at Desert Oasis Healthcare, as well as Caroline Venezia, CRO at Capacity, and Neil Titcombs, SVP at Capacity. So to kick us off, Caroline, I would love for you to give us a little bit of context about what your interactions are telling you something means and what that kind of gets at.
Yeah, no, thank you, Audrey, and I appreciate you having us do this today. So from our perspective, and again, for the title of the session, it really is that conversation intelligence and the interactions that our clients or most contact center leaders are sitting on are one of the most valuable data assets that they have. You have all of this great content and context coming from real customer interactions, whether they're chat, voice, SMS, email interactions. Customers are engaging with your organization. They're giving you feedback on what's working, what's not working, what's driving them to engage. And so what we've seen is, there's no lack of measurement in contact center environments, but the real meat and the real insight of the data is what's happening within those conversations. And most organizations don't have great visibility into what that is today. So when we think about where the contact center space is going, and there's the advent of really implementing AI across that, we think that customer data, the real insight coming from those conversations around what are they actually reaching out for today? What are the friction points? How are they feeling when they're engaging with your agents in the experience today, or even with some of the AI technologies that clients may have put within their contact center ecosystems already? That is great insight, not only for contact center leaders, but for other departments within organizations, whether it's marketing to understand, hey, is our SEO keywords actually driving visitors to our website or driving visitors to engage, to product on what's the feedback that we're getting around specific products or specific product lines that we've rolled out from our customers. So from our perspective, there's so much insight and so much great data that most contact centers are sitting on that can benefit not only their departments, but the larger organization, and really encouraging leaders to take advantage of that and to be able to showcase that within their organizations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great way to start. Conversational intelligence isn't exceptionally new, obviously, but it's a lot more accessible at scale than it was a few years ago. So, Neil, could you speak to the role of conversational intelligence in today's organizations and how it's sort of changed in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can all recognize it's not new technology per se. I mean, the sort of origins of speech analytics date back to the early 2010s when we were just looking at keyword spotting and sound pattern matching. And the result of that is the consumer experience was pretty poor because the accuracy of the transcription was down in the sort of 60% range. And we got a lot of pushback in that period from consumers engaging with it because it just wasn't effective and it was using that sort of basic technology. You jump forward another decade and we move into the world of cloud and NLP. It made it a lot more accessible for people to purchase, and the phonetics replaced that sort of basic word spotting, and accuracy improved to about 80%. So it was getting a lot better. And we saw the beginning, certainly at the end of sort of 2019, 2020 period, of the concept of real-time recognition coming into play. You sort of jump forward to present day, the explosion of AI and the power that's brought to the technology. We're in a completely different arena. We're seeing accuracy now of over 95% in multiple languages. And an agent assist has really driven a huge change in the way transcription is working in the conversations. It happens more than just, to Caroline's point, in the conversation after it's been recorded. So I think we've seen both consumer take up accelerate tremendously thanks to that technology evolution, and we've also seen the applicability and use of it expand beyond just quality control. Is an agent saying and doing the right thing, to, as Caroline just mentioned, just mining really rich data to then give businesses actionable insight to actually show demonstrable change to their processes, the way their employees are trained and taught, and also the experience, of course, the customer is getting.
Thank you. Bill, I know you're currently someone who's leveraging conversational intelligence in your role. So I would love to hear just an overview of what folding it into your strategy looked like and what some of those outcomes that you've tied to the implementation of it.
Sure. Honestly, and I don't know that we're much different than others. We backed into our rapidly evolving need with a better way. We just needed a better way to understand and measure conversations of our staff and our customers. Our organization started 10 years ago with a language of caring curriculum to train and guide our staff. And it just didn't have a scalable way to measure performance. Several years ago, we started with a one-member team to be a rater, basically, and to manually listen to a sampling of calls for performance. The results indicated that our staff just weren't meeting the expectations of our senior leadership for our relationship with our customers. But with the measurements that we had, our frontline staff and supervisors were able to poke holes in the data, saying it was too small, it was too biased, it was, they just found every way possible to discount the feedback that they were getting back. In 2023, we implemented our first, as Neil mentioned, our first cloud-based phone system. And that offered us our first version of AI analytics of our conversations. And it promised to bring us a scalable and non-biased analysis. But unfortunately, that implementation didn't work. And through the relationship with our previous vendor, they recommended capacity to us. And that was really our first entree into large scale and complex analytics. We were able to customize our curriculum into the metrics, and we didn't have to start from scratch, basically. We were able to enhance the metrics that came with capacity. And that was a godsend because we were learning at the same time as we were trying to build, and we couldn't have done that as fast as we did. We started in mid-2025, and now I think we're almost kind of experts in how to build a system. We're learning fast. What capacity offered us were transparent, easy to understand performance dashboards. They were available to inform our teams, our supervisors, and our individual agents, and we could look at the whole organization relative to the customer experience. We continue to learn as we're customizing the system. I mean, it's a continuous feedback loop, and the capacity team's been essential in helping us work that through. We can ask a question, we help build it, and we keep moving forward, and then we continue to learn as we go. We recently used this information to inform us in selecting a new phone system, and we were better consumers, knowing better what we were looking for performance. And we also elected to continue with capacity, even though the new phone vendor offered an analytic system, because we found that having a third party evaluate both us as performers and the equipment and system has been essential for us to, again, have a different level of insight into how the two systems work together. And that is truly the essence of AI and the systems. It's people and the machines working together, and it's just been a good experience. One recent experience for the level of customization, we couldn't have even touched something like this before, was we used capacity to identify suicide ideation. We're healthcare, suicide ideation, and that is an alert system. It detects select group of phrases and immediately alerts a key group of team to be immediately able to respond. And again, this is just great. And then the last thing, or most important thing that we're doing right now, is that we're developing our first AI receptionist abilities with our new phone system. And we predict, and again, this is based on, we have the information through capacity, we'll be able to automate 50 to 60% of our calls for our top reasons for calls. And we were able to pinpoint the things that we wanted to fix with the new system. And again, the level of data that we're able to get through the analytics of capacity has allowed us to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's a great, that example especially is very powerful in showing, what is possible. And I know with conversational intelligence, more generally, it's really good at illuminating the differences between, the customer journeys we plan for versus the ones that actually take place. So I'm curious, for many of you, what are maybe some other examples or use cases for that kind of, identifying those deltas?
Well, if I can continue, we've just learned so much, and it's hard to kind of keep that contained, but because we're learning from pretty much every angle. But we're working with, quickly implemented from an old type of phone system to a cloud-based phone system to AI within a 12-month period. But basically, the challenge for our customers is healthcare is a complex system by itself. Navigating through it can be challenging. So, and then part of it is we have a lot of legacy phone numbers from an old type of phone system that in their time were meant to create better access more to the point. But that just doesn't work with the new technology. So we would have some of the things that we just needed to change were multiple misdirected calls that just simply were based on how a person, different ways that people would ask a question and people's understanding of how they ask that question. We saw a lack of empathy and staff confusion for our staff, but we've been part of that's because of old ways of measuring performance were through production goals of how many calls did you handle as opposed to how well did you handle those calls. So we've made that shift in both where do we introduce AI to take the load off of those staff? How do we better train staff to handle those situations and the complexity of it? And how do you train people to deal with potential fatigue from an ongoing volume? So we're learning a lot by that, and some of it's simply human versus machine. We're through the recordings and the metrics and the measurements. We're seeing people they talk before the call actually starts. They talk too fast. They don't have their equipment adjusted correctly for audio, and we've turned all of those into training opportunities and ongoing training opportunities. And that is one of our biggest lessons, is that we've learned that training needs to be more. It needs to be more timely. It needs to be more in depth, and it has to be more in depth on the systems and our expectations and policies. People ask things in lots of different ways, and the feedback on how you're doing on the call can't be even a week out. It has to be real time at the point of service, because you can't fix it a week later or an hour later. You can course correct midstream during a call. So that's why we're looking forward to that coaching type of ability in the near future.
Yeah, and I'll just double down on that in terms of the insights that you can get around the journey. And again, from Bill and other clients, what we continue to see is without conversational intelligence, you're making a lot of assumptions as to what the customer journey is. So you have your ideal state that you build out and you map that journey to, and you're ultimately trying to provide a great customer experience. And then what conversational intelligence gives you the ability to do is really understand, did the journey that we tried to build actually align with what customers are doing today? And in many cases, it isn't. And it's no fault for the design, like you're trying to build that ideal customer experience. But very small example is, somebody's calling in and they're going through, the agent is going exactly through the script as it's designed. But at the end of the call, the customer, you can slightly hear frustration in their voice. They're going to go pick up and call into another channel. Conversation intelligence is able to illuminate those frustration points. It's able to illuminate, what are the channels that they had already interacted with. If they're dropping that into conversation, what are they going to do next? So that we can really design an experience that is informed by what's happening today and what your customers are actually doing, as opposed to what's designed based on the ideal state. So I think it gives a lot more flexibility and visibility to meet customers where they are, to provide that really engaging experience. And Bill talked a lot about what you guys are doing today to do that, which is fantastic. And that's the whole intent of this, is instead of assuming what the customer experience should be, let's design it around what the customer experience actually is and slowly move them to ideal state.
if I can come in as well, Audrey, I think, first of all, Bill, it's great to hear your story. We first met 18 months ago. You said, you're in a very different position then for your technology and what you knew about your business, and to see how that's evolved over probably less than 12 months of us working together is tremendous. And you're a perfect example, particularly in a regulated market where the data and insights you're leveraging on a daily basis of just changing your business, your processes, the way you train your staff, and even the services you offer, I would imagine. And a lot of our clients come to us with a very nervous sort of approach to, they want to embark on potentially what might be called an AI project, but don't really know where to start. And I think the fact that 2/3 of the global market today still don't analyze every customer conversation across every channel is remarkable to me. And the history lesson I sort of gave earlier is a bit of the reason why that's the case, because they've maybe tried and failed and had bad customer feedback. We're at that point now where this is a very easy way to begin that journey and start to service information you'd otherwise leave on the table completely unknown. And what I love, as Bill's explained, is how it's so demonstrable to everybody involved. Most importantly, your patients and physicians in Desert Oasis's case, but customers and agents in other environments. And it's one of the few things that has such an immediate impact that I've ever worked with that can show such big change. And then, but just pivot continually with consumer change, because we are all changing our expectations of what we want from our service providers every day. Whether it's me, my son, or my mother contacting Desert Oasis, we'll have a different experience expectation, but often businesses have to rely on one single process for one particular problem and have no consideration for the dynamics of the individual. And this technology will start to listen and alert the business to that at that finite level. And I think that's just the detail and the change that moves the dial so quickly, which gives businesses so much choice as to how they then can embark on other solutions. And something we might come on to is this sort of coin of phrase of the learning loop. I think we kind of alluded to it. You're continually learning from past engagement to feed future outcomes. And that for me is just golden, because otherwise you're sort of predicting and trying to guess what's best to stay ahead of your consumer expectation, maybe your competitors. But with this environment, you can start then to, on a daily or even hourly basis, react to change, whether it's a CSAT degradation based on sentiment analysis, whether it's the surfacing of keywords, which suddenly show you that your customers are all talking about your biggest competitor more today than were yesterday. Why? How do we react to that? You could even make changes to pricing or process in the moment to combat that. In other arenas, you'd have to wait to the end of the month to do a random sample of the calls to maybe even identify that. The chances are you wouldn't, because you wouldn't pick up the pattern. So I think it's just very exciting. We're in a real moment of change, and AI is definitely accelerating that. And Bill, it's great to hear your story so far on this journey from where you were just 18 months ago to today.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to something Bill said earlier about the production metrics and how they've kind of become outdated and in favor of new ways of measuring experiences and all of this intelligence. So yeah, Bill, I would love to hear how you kind of reevaluated the mix of metrics you used, and how you came to understand they maybe weren't representing experiences correctly.
Well, as I said before, the old metrics of just time to answer, volume of calls, all of that even still some of our external auditors, that's what they want to know about phone calls. It's like, you're really behind the times. Our customers, almost all of us are exposed to the world around us. We had people come to us with an Amazon Prime or a Google search expectation of, I can self-manage this. I know what the question is. I want you to give me the answer that I need. And the metrics were not anywhere close to being able to match those two things together. So it's the reality of how we're looking at metrics is not just from one dimension or even 4 dimensions. It's this whole interaction of hundreds of different interrelationships of where something starts and where it needs to end up. And so that's informing not only our senior management on how they set their expectations, or how we work in our work teams on our scripting or our expectations interdepartmentally, all of those measurements have to be considered in how we build it into the analysis of what we then say on the phone system. We haven't even gone into our texting or some of those other areas because there's just such a rich amount of information in our phone data. But it absolutely is affecting pretty much every part of our business. And the beauty of it is something Neil just addressed, is a senior manager can ask me a question. I can pull up my dashboard and say, well, just wait, I can show you. I don't have to say, promise a report. Well, the next time I report to you, I'll give you that. It's, you want to know now? Let me just kind of finesse this and I can give it to you. To have that robust set of data in front of you, or when somebody asks, well, you can tell me all that, but how about this? The patients that called on a Saturday and after 6 p.m., what were their needs, or what was our response time? How did that impact, in our case, how did that impact admissions to the hospital? I can answer some of that information. All as a fairly naive user, I can get that information relatively quickly. So those are just a couple of simple examples, but as Neil said, it's very dynamic, and it's informing how we approach other applications of AI, and they're coming at us from every angle. But it helps us understand what our expectations should be of other AI systems, and that they must interact with our conversational data set, because they're inseparable. And at least from our customer standpoint, they have to work together. And that's, we're actually able to address some of that and without being afraid of it.
And I'll jump in there because I think, Bill, that was an incredibly important point. It's something that we're seeing more and more as we approach just clients in this market, is that expectation and the value of having your AI systems connected to your conversation intelligence. Because as we've been talking about, I think it's such a rich data set that even for clients who are just starting their AI journey, maybe they know they want to implement AI agents to do deflection for people calling into a contact center. We can deflect a lot of those self-service requests and provide that self-service customer experience. When a lot of leaders are coming, they're saying, okay, we think this is what the AI agent should do. This is what our perspective is. But to really provide the best experience, starting with conversational intelligence is the best foundational way to really understand and build an AI agent that's going to be, one, positioned to provide the best experience, and two, actually solution for what customer challenges are. So if you think about, every client typically has a good set of their customer data and interaction data that is happening today. And one approach that we've taken with our clients is using that as a starting point. So let's analyze those conversations. Let's really understand what are the big friction points that customers have? What are the intents that they're calling in for? What are they looking for from an informational or process standpoint? And then that helps us drive a really crafted recommendation to clients to say, hey, here's what we'd recommend from an AI agent build. You wanted to focus on these key intents. This is the journey that your customers are looking for. And that's really where we start and say, okay, that's what the AI agent should be doing, how it should be focused. And it's all built based on the actual conversations that are happening today within the contact center. And then what we see is when they roll out those AI agents, they're seeing the effectiveness of those exponentially compared to just starting with the assumptions of what those should be. So building out something that's crafted based on the experience that's happening, that's driven towards providing that ideal customer experience and that experience that client customers want. And then as things get escalated, all of that is feeding into that conversation intelligence in the back end. So Neil mentioned it before, that learning loop. All of these systems being connected together because they can continuously measure, understand what's happening, and optimize the AI agents, or whether it's real-time agent assist over time, is imperative, because there's such an ability now to customize experiences and learn from what's happening in real time to drive optimizations and ensure the overall systems are working in concert together, but getting better and better over time.
There's a phrase, sorry, Audrey, I was just going to add a little bit more to that, that we use a lot, which is, well, I use a lot certainly, which is actionable insight. So it's great to surface information, and we've seen that in the early days of QA tools, but it typically sort of sat on a shelf, and it was more of a, as I say, a compliant tool. I think this era of technology now gets, as Bill's explained, just data that you can leverage immediately in each and every day. And I think one of the best parts of my job, as Caroline alluded to, is we will often take a small sample set of a prospective client's data, their call recordings or their chat transcriptions, their virtual agent transcriptions. We'll ingest it into the model. We'll run them through some queries and some QA templates and things, and we'll just play that back as a sample. I think we did it with you, Bill, and it's remarkable how the lights almost come on. As in, wow, now I can understand what you mean. That's actually my information. I have no idea we said that so much. I had no idea our customers praised or complained about this. And you can just see the imagination starting to unfold and what they've not been able to do and what they're missing out on. And that's where we can then just create this journey to embark upon. And it isn't instant gratification into all different components of what capacity can offer. It's a gradual process in many cases, but to Caroline's point, we start with that action insight data to build the foundation, to Bill's point, to understand which calls we can take into a virtual queue and which are causing more friction and which are more sensitive and need much more of a white glove approach, where an agent has to handle that as quickly as possible with the right data, and then probably with real-time agent guidance to actually help them understand and handle the things they might have forgotten where it's a very particular question or complicated inquiry.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I think you all covered a lot of good points there. So I have a couple follow-up questions, but my understanding is a point of resistance to systems like this is that there's kind of a misconception that it would really require an overhaul of systems, or, it acts as something that would really disrupt the existing configuration of technology. So I would love to hear maybe what are some of the obstacles associated with that, but ultimately, whether or not that is a true sentiment, or what kinds of accessibility is offered here.
I'm happy to start with that, and obviously it'd be great to hear from Bill's first-hand experience. But I think one of the things that capacity prides ourselves on is that we are very interoperable and platform agnostic. So we are very used to working with clients with wide and deep tech stacks, typically quite mature and complex. At the very least, there's a telephone system, a contact center platform of some degree in situ, and we have very open ways to talk to that data to give us that platform independence. And Bill's a great example because he's actually pivoted from one platform to another during his use of the capacity solution. So the first misconception is it needs to be compatible, it needs to plug in through a certain way which the incumbent might need to manage. That's often not the case, and the truth is, because it's a subscription service and extremely easy to consume, then the time to value is often very, very fast. And I think we want to give as much value in as short a time as possible, doesn't everybody, and then build upon that with both confidence that the product will deliver in terms of its compatibility, its speed, its accuracy, particularly in conversation intelligence, and then grow that into other areas that we talked about, whether that's real-time agent guidance, virtual agent technology, knowledge management, some of the other areas that also interlock to our particular proposition, and what Desert Healthcare are beginning to see. So short answer is it's actually much more easy than people think. It's certainly a lot easier than it was 10 years ago when this was on-premise technology that needed a lot of heavyweight integration and maintenance and support. Quite the opposite now. It's very light touch, and we can plug into almost any environment. I don't know, Bill, you want to add to that as an example and first-hand user?
Well, I agree with that, and we are in midst of our implementation right now, and the porting, maybe the wrong word, but porting the one experience into our new vendor into capacity has been fairly seamless. It was way easier than our first implementation with our other vendor. So it's 100% agree that the capacity platform is just very easy to make. You can basically stand it up in any system and it will work. The other part that is a reality with this is that this is a cultural change. No matter any way that you go to approach it, it's challenging people's. People are afraid of their job, that there's job loss, they're afraid of anything called AI, but we don't call capacity AI, even though that's what it is that we just don't call it that, and it feels natural, it feels acceptable. It's catered to a front-end user's experience, and it's just kind of a natural interface to get that information. And that makes all the difference because we don't have to put as much effort into making it acceptable to people. The way that as I mentioned before, we're working on the implementation and the design of our AI receptionist. And we're using a cross-divisional communications committee approach. So everybody's engaged from the ground floor on, here's your data from capacity, how we're performing. These are our top reasons for calls. How, with your knowledge, do you want this to be informed to measure what you think is important? And that cross-divisional communication, we don't anticipate much resistance when it goes live because they have been getting this information from their dashboards for the last 12 months and they're comfortable with it. Now they're more likely to say, okay, I'm seeing this trend, I don't like it, how can we fix it? Is it the metric? Do we need to add more measurement, or what do we need to do to make the two things work together and have better performance scores? So that the information has made it easy to develop how the solution unfolds, if that makes sense. And the example that we're working toward is our data shows us that we have a lot of unnecessary transfers of calls. And so we're anticipating just off the top, 3 to 10 unnecessary legs of calls will be eliminated because of using the data to pinpoint how we could improve that. We can listen to examples of where a conversation maybe goes wrong or is misdirected, and then reroute the mapping of that and the scripting of it, whether it's the AI part of it or the human side of it, so that it's a seamless experience for the customer. So it's allowed us to have the ability to identify an issue and rapidly come up with a solution and implement it, sometimes in a daily, within 24 hours. I mean, it's just sort of been kind of amazing of what we're able to do. And a lot of the information that we're getting to in our new system will have a on-screen FAQ to inform staff, and it also informs the AI. But both the machine and the humans will be using the same scripting and same map to come up with a solution. It's been pretty incredible. And it allows us, we're building a process, again, using the data and the systems with the recognition that we are going to continue to change as we move forward. And we'll feel comfortable with that, where we're at with it, because it's just been a proven source of information that I don't think we're using half of the information that's there, because we just haven't been able to, comprehend it all yet. So
give it time, Bill.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really awesome how, it's kind of unprecedented, the volume of data that can be processed through this level of intelligence. When you talk about like previous methods of QA or previous methods of pulling samples, like it's really only scratches the surface of the information that's available. So it's really exciting that, even you've seen such great results already, but there's still so much yet to come because there's so much yet to uncover. Yeah, that, just going back to something, Caroline, you were talking about earlier, training agentic using conversations and how that's a really excellent way to go about that. I'm curious if you've seen like a reduction in the siloed nature of business and how when you're training on conversation, you're kind of more attuned to the customer versus training on internal processes, you're just inherently more siloed. Curious if you've seen that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I do think that's the case. So I think just as we talked about earlier, assuming you know what the customer experience should be is one thing. And again, I think most of the leaders that we talk to have a really good sense of what they want that customer experience to be. But being able to marry it with what's actually happening, what are the customers actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and giving them that real world insight is a really way to, one, helpfully understand, okay, how should we design the agentic experience? But then two, Bill's referenced it a couple of times as well. I think in practice, everything looks great, but then when you start to see the reality of what's happening in an actual call environment or in an email environment or text interaction, you can adjust your processes and your coaching to better align and better service the customers. So when you have all the process documentation that you're training on, yes, it really brings those teams together to say, okay, we started with a great framework. Let's adjust this. Let's pivot this area or this script to make sure it aligns with exactly how we can best provide the ideal customer experience or even agent experience, so that they're not reiterating the same thing over and over again. And we can really streamline what they need to capture. So I absolutely think when you start to get that deep insight into what's happening today, it really starts to break down those internal silos and really rally around how do we drive this better experience based on what in actuality is happening in these channels in the environment today.
Talking a little bit more about the agent experience or the employee experience. Bill, you hinted at it a little bit earlier, but the fact that the tools are easy to use and intuitive goes such a long way. Obviously, nowadays agents have so many different tools, and that's one of the major sources of fatigue and attrition is just the tool overload that we're seeing. But yeah, just curious in your experience with this new project, what, like you said, the end users of the product are seeing, and like what how they're navigating it, even being new to it.
Well, probably the hardest thing that we've had to overcome is people are historically trained to the test, and so they focus on their score as opposed to all the other information that's possibly there. So that learning curve over the past 12 or so months has been, bring your eyes down a little bit. Don't just look at that simple coding of, in our case, it's a simple red, yellow, green, of coachable is yellow, green is good, and whatever our benchmarks are. But we want people to look at what is it actually telling you about opportunities in your conversation that could have been better, and not that it's just okay, you screwed up there and we want you to do it our way. It's there are multiple things here that you could have possibly done. Maybe showing some empathy, slowing down how you were talking so that the person didn't have to repeat themselves. All of those, just some examples. So, but they're getting that kind of feedback, and we really have just had to bring people to look at this other stuff that's telling you did really good on these different areas. So keep doing that. But in this instance, this type of a situation, not all situations, but this kind of a situation, there may be a different way to have a better outcome. That part of the journey can be rapid cycled. I mean, we can get an alert on a type of a call, contact the supervisor, have them have an individual coaching session with that staff member or a team, and identify like, okay, they didn't know the current information that they were supposed to be telling, or there's some kind of a back in the day of COVID, when there was a high intensity of calls related to people being sick, it was hard to keep up with the intensity and the rapid change of the type of information. In this type of a setting, just as one example, we can inform people and predict of this is coming, people will need to know this, they'll need a little bit of time to change how their conversation and the information they need to know, and then possibly how to reroute that call. This is all information we can see happening in our analysis of our calls. So again, we can do this in more real time. A supervisor can do it, our senior management team can do it, or the frontline user can do that and be aware of how that performance is going. Now, we haven't, the last part for us will be to tie our other external measure of our customer satisfaction for access and just overall satisfaction. But we've already been seeing improvement on those metrics too. So we know that what we're doing and how we're changing the course of our staff on the front line is impacting the ultimate satisfaction and how our customers are rating us even 1 month out from that interaction. So they're retaining it. We're seeing a real move in what we wanted, and we're actually attaining what we set out 10 years ago to do.
I think I would add a few points to that. I mean, I think you raise a good point, Audrey. I mean, user, and in this case, agent advisor adoption is critical. And I've worked in contact centers a long time and sold lots of different types of solutions, and many do get great pushback from the agent, and that can have a really negative effect, obviously, on the performance and the overall success of the solution. This is somewhat different. The initial perception can be, oh, it's another inspection tool. They're trying to measure me more, and it's actually seen as quite negative. The experience we see is actually quite the opposite, because our team will help clients like Desert Oasis explain what's happening and why, and when they see the results that can be surfaced and how they can benefit them, then it becomes very much a carrot, if you like, more than any stick. So in service industry, then they want to make sure they're obviously being the best they can be. And one of our mottos is making sure your agents and staff can do their best work, and that's really important to us. And these are tools that can really work towards that. Obviously, it doesn't apply so much in healthcare, but if you're in a sales-driven organization, then this is a tool that can help you sell more, succeed more, make your goals and your quotas. And when advertised and presented that way, where it will be surfacing where they could be better and giving them a path to change and improve, potentially in some cases very rudimentarily comparing to a peer who's doing something just better, and to Bill's earlier point, giving the business the ability to create a different training schedule to improve the people that don't say or act in a certain way that has a negative outcome compared to those that do something different and have a positive outcome. That's very comparable for anybody to understand, well, why wouldn't I want to do that? And they're giving me a path to be better, more than just, oh, they're inspecting whether I'm checking all the boxes and saying and doing the right thing. Yes, of course, we're going to give you the ability to see who's talking too fast and talking over a client, or just not following the right process, and that in itself should be improved. But I think for me, it's about selling it in a way that the advisor can understand they will just be better at their job. It takes out friction. We see so much fatigue and churn and attrition in the industry at the moment. These tools can even have a marked effect on helping with that. And I don't know whether, Bill, you've seen that, but I've worked with clients that can have attrition up to 50%. I mean, it's remarkable the amount of movement because of stress in the industry. And if we can take some of that away by just taking out friction, making it more straightforward for them to follow our process, then of course that's a benefit to them and the business.
Definitely. And one of the things that a decision we made is that at minimum for the first year, there were no punitive consequences for the feedback that they were getting. It really made a difference, both for the supervisors to not feel overwhelmed that, oh God, I'm going to have to counsel everybody all the time, but also for the frontline users, that they didn't feel like, as Neil said, they're going to be auditing me and I'm going to get in trouble. That was not the intent. We wanted to get better, and we recognized that we all needed to get better together. But first, we had to learn and understand what we were doing. So that has I think it has really made a difference to adopt that kind of a policy. And I don't foresee that we will change that, because we don't want to cut off that ability to receive feedback, because we all need it. And again, the systems that we're working in, our environment, everybody's environment, is just changing so rapidly that I don't think anybody can draw a line in the sand of like, okay, now this is what our perfect expectation for performance is going to be, because tomorrow will be different. So we really have just built it in as a continuous feedback loop, and it really has diminished some of that resistance that could have been there.
Thank you. I know we're just getting at the end here. So before we dive into some key takeaways, I would also love if anyone out there in the audience wants to share any of their highlights from the conversation. Any questions, we'll obviously get back to you, and feel free to let us know in the chat if you'd like to learn more. But yeah, maybe Caroline, you could kick us off with, if you could have the audience take one thing away from this conversation, or, what the future of conversation intelligence entails, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what we've been sharing throughout. I think that the one area that I would love for people to take away from this is that they have a rich data set that they're sitting on today. And Neil shared some of the stats earlier. The vast majority of businesses aren't taking advantage of that data today. So even if it is just, let's do a small test to analyze some of the interactions that are occurring and understand what are those friction points, what are the challenges, how it can be used across the business. I think Neil and Bill both shared, when you guys started out, you did that just small data set and got the insights, and then were able to expand from there. I think that's the recommendation I would give, is that it's such a rich set of data to use, not only just in contact center, but across the broader business, that can improve both the customer, the agent, and the business operational experiences, that taking advantage of it, testing it out is a great way to start. And it can form so much across not only the AI journey, but just how it can improve operations across the contact center over time.
I would say, I'll go a bit more shocking, I suppose. If you're not preparing to analyze all your customer conversations across every channel, then you're going to fall far behind your competitors very quickly. It's just no longer acceptable to assume you can understand your customer behavior and your industry by listening to one call out of 100 or one call a month, which so many businesses still do. That's just leaving, as we've discussed, so much information that you can use in so many different ways on the table. It's not that difficult to embark upon it. You don't need to be a regulated or a sales-driven organization, which is also often the concept as well for the use cases that would require this the most. It applies to every business to consumer, business to business environment, at any shape and size, anywhere in the world, across any language. There is no boundary to this. So take the leap. You can start small. We can work with you to actually demonstrate and prove that it works in your languages, in your conversations, in your channels, in your tech environment. And you can build the case for change, both with demonstrable results, but also return on investment, which is obviously, we recognize is important in today's market. So that would be what I'd say to remember.
I agree. And just to say it very simply, it's completely doable, and you must do it. It is where the customer and your business meet. And it doesn't matter what your line of service is. If your customer satisfaction, if they're not getting the responses they need, then you're not up to par. And the technology is moving so fast that if we don't do it, somebody else will. That's the bottom line.
Well, thank you. I think that's the great note to end on. I appreciate all your time. It's very exciting to be, feeling like we're at the cutting edge of this and hearing about all the transformation it's brought. So I'm sure, people will get a lot out of it. And yeah, thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.